Welcome to your weekly program, BelAhdan, the show that brings the soft side of Muslim Americans. We have election last week, and we always want to find out how Muslim Americans voted in that election and the role that plays in bringing Obama back to the office, and the relationship between Muslim and the community at large. We have here somebody who's been watching the election. We have Tamim Saidi. He's born in Afghanistan and came here, went to school in 1990, I think, and he got a PhD in pharmacy. And he is one of the founder of Northwest Islamic Community Center. And we're going to talk about the Muslims and how they elected mid the election this year. We also have here somebody who is really one of the activists, and she is been activist for a long, long time, and she made some headlines since the FBI investigation, raids on their homes and all that. So it just give you a flavor from the other sides, from non-Muslim, non-Arab, non-ethnic, and how they feel and how they think about the security that usually been associated with immigrants and what have you. We have Jess Sunday, and she's a committee, she's one of the founder of the committee to stop FBI repression. My goodness, this sounds like something you hear in Egypt, the repression of Mubarak, but I'm sure there is repression everywhere. But welcome you all for BelAhdan. Let's start with you, Tamim. And it seems like the immigrants and the way this country is changing played a major role of bringing Obama back. And it seems like some of the white Obama got 59%, but the Latino he got 71%. And the black, he got 93%, Muslims, 83%. So obviously, the Republicans missed the boat about the changing demographic in the face of this country. From your experience, you voted, right?
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about it. And the turnout for Muslims American, it was very, very high.
It was very high. I thought it was as close as 96%, I think.
So probably I'm the only one who did not vote.
You did not vote?
I'm the 4%. No, I did vote. But tell us a little bit about, how excited were you before the election? How is it different than the first one to it? And how the Muslims, what are the issues that the Muslim American were voted on?
Excellent question. I mean, for me personally, I'm always excited about elections. I think this is the only way that you can bring positive, pragmatic change to the country and also to the United States, to the world. So I'm always excited about election. This year, I can tell you that our family was so excited that my mother had a knee replacement surgery about a month ago.
And
so she lives here, and she's a citizen. And actually, even she went with us to vote on a wheelchair. So we took her over there to make sure. We wanted to make sure that the election is not going to be decided by one vote.
I think it could be.
And I would suggest to everyone that that's how they should see it. That if I am the last person voting, I want to make sure I don't.
What was she excited about?
I think she was definitely excited about having Obama in the office. I think she was definitely excited that there has been a positive change since the Bush years and the neocon years and the neocon policies. I think she was excited that the war in Iraq has come to an end, and I think she's excited that the war in Afghanistan is coming to an end, hopefully soon, although we're always concerned about any possible civil wars happening there again. So I think she was excited about those, and so were we.
So mostly like international issue, domestic issue?
I think definitely that. Domestic also. I think the polls that they had for the Muslims, when they asked them, what are you concerned about, the economy and the jobs were number one. And also Muslims are concerned about the schools, because our children go to school here. If the schools are well, we are doing well, education.
Education is very high in our culture.
Absolutely. And I think this year, of course, in Minnesota, we had the 2 amendments that we had to vote for. That was definitely part of it. And then, of course, it's the foreign policy, which, for Muslims, it hits home quite often because we have relatives overseas. We are always in contact with friends. So that's very important.
It's interesting that Muslim Americans went to churches to vote. And also,
I went to a church to vote.
Yeah, and your mom did, or whatever. And they voted for gay rights. And I think a lot, I'm not all of them, but it seems like how mainstream that you want them to be. Didn't bother by going to the church. Didn't bother by voting for amendment, giving people that might not agree with culture and cultural issue also a vote. So I'm sure there must be a bigger issue other than those 2 amendments that makes them support Obama too.
I think definitely. I mean, those amendments, I think this year I'm part of a few discussion group email lists and so on. I think we had a very mature discussions on those things. It was not really just one or the other. We had a very, it was not black and white. It was many shades of gray in between. So we had a good discussion on those things. And I think one thing to remember about the Muslim community internationally or the American Muslim community is that definitely it's not a monolithic community. And when the polls that I looked at, the people who say that they are moderate were about the majority, 55% said they are moderates. And the liberals, they said they are 26%, right? The liberal Muslims. And then only 16% say that they consider themselves to be conservatives. So this is definitely not a monolithic community. So I think that's
and even the independent are much bigger than Democrats who think.
I think Democrats, the polls that I saw, Democrats beat the independents by 1%. I think 42% say Democrats and 41% said that they were independent. Yeah, and then the number of Republicans actually shrunk a little bit than it was before. So that was no change.
But it's interesting that when you debate an issue like gay marriage or marriage amendment itself, and it seems like redefining marriage, and I think Muslim has defined marriage long time ago. So it's not it wasn't a big issue for them. So were they willing to support something in the cultural issue, and in return they make sure the bigger issue of economy and foreign policy? I saw, you see a lot of people who are willing to go that route.
I mean, I think there are definitely some Muslims who are in favor of gay marriage, but I mean, the interesting thing this time was that they were not all connected together. Somebody could have voted for Obama, somebody could have voted for Amy Klobuchar, and they could have voted
looked at it independently.
Yes in favor of making a marriage between man and woman. So I think there were two independent questions. So I don't think we have any exit polls after that. How did the Muslim community vote on those things? But I would imagine that the conservative Muslims voted for the marriage being between man and woman, and the liberal Muslims probably voted for saying that it's okay for them to be all equal. And it's hard to tell how the independents voted. So it's definitely not a monolithic community.
And also, in your take, when you say more than 90% participated in that election, that means security and the fact trusting the political process was a big issue of the Muslim community. They actually believe in those processes and they want to be part of it.
Absolutely. I think Muslims do believe that their vote counts. Because we know here in Minnesota that Al Franken won by 300 votes. And I personally feel that the Muslims had a role in electing Al Franken over Norm Coleman. Because we remember from Norm Coleman a few years ago when the representatives of Muslim community went to meet with him, and he actually refused to meet with the Muslim community. And he was also somebody who voted in favor of
Nobody
Iraq
wants
war.
to meet with Muslim community.
Well, no, many people do. Mark Dayton has been actually coming visiting the Islamic centers and the Muslims, and he actually mentioned, it was really interesting, I was on the governor's prayer breakfast once, and he actually mentioned a few verses from the Quran and the sayings of Prophet Muhammad. And we know Amy Klobuchar, she actually came visited the Islamic centers. Al Franken has been more on the Democratic side, and the Republicans have not reached out to the Muslims. I think that's why the ratio of Republicans are shrinking very much.
Republicans are afraid of Sharia. But when you look at the debate and Obama and Mitt Romney, nobody mentioned the Muslims in any way. I mean, it seems like Muslims every election, especially presidential one, they feel politically homeless. Nobody addresses their issues.
Yeah. I think this year the election was very noted for very little mention of religion. Of course, we had Mitt Romney, who was a Mormon, and President Obama, who was a Christian, but he's being accused of being a Muslim. But of course, this time around, there was not much mention of religion. But the one thing that I like about President Obama, which I did not see in Mitt Romney's speeches and discussion, was that when Obama mentions the churches and synagogues, and he also includes mosques. Whereas the Mitt Romney and most of the Republicans, they do not include the mosques in there, which actually makes the Muslims feel that in their vision of America, we are not included. Right? Well, so I think that means a lot to Muslims, saying that, as a vision of America, as that includes the mosques and the churches, the mosques and the synagogues and the temples, that all Americans are part of America. But sometimes when you listen to some of the Republican candidates, it feels as if that they do not include all these other religious minorities as part of America, or maybe the atheists, they do not probably include them as part of that. So it's interesting to be mentioned as part of that.
Well, especially coming from a man who believes in polygamy and more than 4 wives. Maybe we should...
Well, just to be correct, I don't think he said that.
But anyway, well, let's go to Jess here. You're a troublemaker. And... And you keep on doing it. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Is this,
Sure.
how did that start?
Well, I came to Minnesota in 1991, just after the first war in Iraq.
1 year after he came.
Yeah. So, and my first experience with protests was protesting the invasion of Iraq in 1991. And I came here and I went to college and I kind of forgot about Iraq. And then in the late 90s, the community here started organizing, including with Iraqis. Many people, hopefully some of your viewers, know Sami Rassouli, who is a former restaurateur here.
Of course, yeah.
And
Sinbad.
other families, Sinbad's, and started talking about the sanctions. And I realized that the war in Iraq had never really ended. And I traveled to Iraq in 1998, and it changed my life.
What, on your own, or was a group of?
It was a group of about 100 people who went, and our trip was called the Iraq Sanctions Challenge. And we brought tens of thousands of dollars worth of medical aid with us. And it was an open challenge to the embargo or the blockade. The UN and US had said that Iraq couldn't bring in medicines or chlorine to treat water or any pencils for school children. So many things that they said could be dual use, could be used to make weapons, to make war against us. And we said, no, people need medicines, they need penicillin, and they need inhalers. And so, like I said, about 100 of us traveled together, and openly, our luggage said Iraq Sanctions Challenge on it. And it was a wonderful experience. It was my first personal experience with the generosity that I've since learned is very common in many of the Arab cultures.
Do you recommend a trip like that? It seems like Americans are just so happy that what's going on here, and then our system, they have no clue what the empire, the damage that the empire is doing abroad.
I think I thought of myself as someone who was open and thoughtful about the international community, but it was traveling to Iraq and seeing the effects of the war that had ended 7 years earlier, but the sanctions that had prevented any kind of rebuilding and in fact sunk the country deeper into crisis.
More children died during that sanction than the war
itself.
Yeah,
1.5 million people died in that country. It's shocking, as many people as live here in the Twin Cities died in the country of Iraq. So we went to Iraq. There were actually 3 of us that traveled from the Twin Cities, and we came back and began talking about what we had seen and building a movement that could continue to oppose the sanctions, and that really sprang into action when Iraq was invaded again in 2003. So that's my story of how I got interested in particularly the Arab world.
That's a great story.
My work became in the category of troublemaking in 2008 when the Republican National Convention was here in St. Paul. And I was one of the leaders of the anti-war march on the first day of the convention. And as part of that organizing, we began to be spied on by law enforcement, an experience that I have since come to understand and realize more than I ever did is happening in probably every mosque in the country, and certainly in the Somali community here in the Twin Cities and many others. And so we're not aware that we were being spied on. An undercover agent infiltrated the anti-war committee, which I have worked with since it started in 1998 after my trip. And she spied on us for 2 years and was reporting to her headmasters in Chicago. There was a solidarity trip that others were going to take to Palestine, and she called up the Israelis and told them not to let them in. And in fact, our friends weren't able to travel. They were stopped at the airport in Tel Aviv. And a few months after that trip is actually when one morning at 7 a.m., the bang at my door. I woke up, bang, bang, bang.
Your house was raided, wasn't it?
My house was raided by about a dozen FBI agents.
Is this how the FBI call it, raided? What do they call it?
Well, they present you with a search warrant. I've never heard them call it anything else.
Yeah.
It's not...
For you,
it's not like a visit, or they're much worse than uninvited guests.
Dinner for them or something?
What's that?
Do you have dinner for them or tea?
No, and it's so. It turns out they were raiding homes in Chicago and Minneapolis, 8 different homes or 9 homes, and the offices of the anti-war.
So when you say raided,
what
does that mean?
Well, it feels like a raid because
do they get in?
8 law enforcement officers, or a dozen in my home. But when they banged on
How
our
big
door,
your home? Or a mansion?
It's a
What?
two-story house. It's like it's not a mansion, no. But I live there with my daughter, my partner, and our roommates. There's 4 of us that live there, and we each have our own bed. We have 3 bedrooms, but that's it. But when they knocked at the door, we were kind of slow because we don't have a lot of visitors at 7.
Yeah.
We weren't ready to.
You don't understand what it was all
No,
about.
and my partner and my daughter, when they got to the door and finally got it open, they were poised with a battering ram. And I feel very like it's a strange thing to feel lucky, but luckily it wasn't a few seconds difference, and they could have rammed their battering ram into them, into our child who was 6 years old at the time. And they spent the next 4 hours going through everything we owned. And they took pieces of paper.
You just stood there?
We were in various states of getting out of our pajamas.
Do they ask you when we're going to do this?
No, they say they just show you the papers and say, we have a court order to search your home and seize anything on this list. And it was like papers, and they took my cell phone and our computers and any paper about anti-war activism, any books about Palestine. My friend Hatem, who's Palestinian in Chicago, they took every book at his home that was in Arabic. And his little daughter, who was 5 at the time, said, Baba, like, I don't think any of these men can read Arabic. Why are they taking our books?
Arabic script is an incriminating evidence.
Yeah, well, exactly. And what they took was evidence of who I know and what I believe.
I see.
It wasn't evidence.
So that's the main purpose is to
they claimed
expand it.
that they were looking for evidence that we were involved in giving material support to foreign terrorist organizations, specifically in Colombia and Palestine. Some of the folks who were raided that day had traveled to Palestine. I hadn't, but I had, helped organize some of the trips. And that day they didn't ask any of us questions. Now, I don't know how it went at every house. At our house, we were very stern with them. And I know there's been a lot of controversy in the Muslim communities, but I think any attorney would advise anyone not to talk to the FBI without your attorney present. So none of us did. We later learned they had a list of 100 questions they hoped to ask us about who's in our meetings and who leads the meetings.
They didn't ask them.
They didn't ask them that day.
And why is that?
We think it's because all of us very quickly, they're being pretty aggressive. You're not feeling very chatty. We had good instincts and we didn't choose to talk to them. And so they just went about their business, searching our homes and seizing what they wanted.
How did that change your life? I mean, as America believes in this country, believes in a legal system.
I think the greatest shock was probably to my parents.
So were they there?
My parents live in Australia, but they had they were just visiting.
Oh.
And I had to find a telephone because they took mine to call them and explain. The story broke into CNN. They don't live here in Minnesota, but they heard about what's happening.
See. Wow.
And I needed them to understand that I had done nothing wrong. The fact is that I changed the way I read the news. I read about mobsters getting raided by the FBI, and I wonder, did they really do anything wrong? But I think most Americans, their first instinct is, like you said, they trust that if law enforcement has come to your home, you have done something wrong, in spite of the fact that you're innocent till proven guilty. But in the eyes of the public, that's not always something guaranteed.
They told the story very well for the American people. Tamim, you guys have been raided, spied on, and all you do is just go and election a couple of times a year. Why you're not? When I go to demonstration, when I do go to the activism, I don't see a lot of Muslims participating in the process that is really it affects them on a daily basis. Is this a tradition of going and protest? Is this something not well ingrained in the community?
Well, I guess it depends. I'm sure there are some Muslims generally in some of those things. I mean, I have been to some of them myself personally. But the idea is, I think, a lot of Muslims coming from a lot of very dictatorial governments from overseas.
I see.
I don't think they feel comfortable being in a protest. And also, they probably would feel that being in a protest probably would not bring any benefits.
Yes.
I think I would imagine that more Muslims probably would feel that they can bring a more change, more positive change through elections than through protests. But I think
you
have a
tried
very
that
good point.
election, Sandy? You just go elect Chance and leave the guy alone.
You know, I voted for Obama, and look what it got me.
Well, I want to end this. Thank you so much. You're a great trooper. Thank you so much. And I just want to finish this with a great story from a filmmaker and documentary here, Kat Moon, and she really was struck by a story of a dog that changes, a relationship between a Muslim family and the rest of the community. So we'll end that show with that story, and thank you, Kate, and thank you, Kat, and everybody else. Thank you, guys, and see you next week. Assalamu alaikum, and God bless you all.
Post 9/11, many Muslims felt scrutinized by their neighbors. This is the story of a Muslim American family and how they discovered that by adopting a dog, they could integrate into this Minnesota community.
We wanted a dog, and after 9/11, we were all depressed and sad and upset, and it seemed like 9/11 overwhelmed everything.
Typically, Muslims don't like dogs. Ahmed would need to be persuaded.
Dogs are looked at as animals, should be outside of the house. Once you touch an animal or a dog, you need to wash off before you go to pray.
Ahmed's family had different ideas. They wanted a dog.
My daughter and I said, we're going to go get the dog. And then we got in the car and went. And we drove an hour west, and we brought home Oliver, a little tiny ball of Oliver.
After some adjustment, Ahmed and Oliver became close friends. Neighbors came to know Ahmed as Oliver, the name of his dog.
Everybody that has a dog is a good dog, is a good guy.
They met regularly at the dog park, and soon Ahmed became acquainted with his neighbors.
Oh, not this one.
They were diseased. 4, yes. 4 huge.
Plastic dogs ready to get there. Go ahead. So if you got one, let's touch it. But if they don't
Okay,
take care.
Take care.
See ya, Ollie.
Bye, Oliver. Bye, Oliver. See ya, Ollie.
Right after 9/11, you walk to a street or walk to a library or a supermarket, and people look at you. They just don't know what to do. Should they say hi or call 911? But now, when you have Oliver with you, they just right away. They are. You are one of them. You join the tribe. You join the civilized world.
It's like you're okay.
Yeah, you're okay.
Yeah.
You're okay. I've never seen somebody happy to see me like Oliver. It's nice to know when you get home you're going to see somebody at least one be excited to see you.